Giulia Canciani. I'm the Policy Director of Bioenergy Europe, and I would like, first of all, to thank you for the invitation to participate to this great conference today. My presentation is, as you see on the screen, about the European Green Deal. We heard a lot about this European Green Deal, and today I'm going to assess a bit the challenges and the opportunities for the European bioenergy sector. But before I jump into that, I would like to say a couple of words about the organization that I belong to. I work for Bioenergy Europe, as I said. This is the largest European association grouping the bioenergy sector. We represent around 140 members in 30 countries. Most of our members are corporate, but we also represent around 30 associations and academia and research centers. So, as I said, today we're going to assess the challenges and opportunities that are offered by the European Green Deal. And in order to do that at the best, I would like to start from giving a picture of what is the European bioenergy sector today. Then I will talk about the race to carbon neutrality and what the member states are putting in place, what plans, what objectives for the next 10 years. And then I'm going to go to policy and speaking about the challenges and opportunities for our sector. So first thing first, where is the bioenergy sector today? How are we helping the European energy mix to the transition? As you see in this slide, today the European energy mix is still dauntingly dominated by non-renewable energy sources that are representing around 82% of the total. This is the evolution of the gross final energy consumption in the European Union. And as you see, around 17.5% are represented by renewable energy, and 10% of this 17 is represented by bioenergy itself. We know all that bioenergy is the largest renewable energy source in the European Union, and this represents 10.3% of the final energy consumption, but almost 60% of all renewables. Bioenergy also represents an essential contribution to all member states to achieve the EU climate and energy targets. As you see in these slides, this is representing the energy mix basically of all member states. And you will see that, in terms of renewables. And you will see that actually bioenergy represents the largest majority for most of the member states. And you see there also the situation of Estonia, where bioenergy represents over 80% of the overall renewable consumption. We like to think that, and we know that bioenergy sometimes is really in the spotlight for the wrong reasons. But something that I really like to underline when I'm speaking about our sector is that the biomass that we use in Europe is actually mostly European. So it's a properly indigenous energy source, and we're only 4.6 dependent from third countries. And in this picture, you can see also what is the rate of dependency of fossil fuels. For natural gas, we're 74% dependent. For petroleum and other products, 93%. And for solid fossil fuels, 44%. So this is, I think, a very important signal. But I would also like to touch upon very quickly to the contribution that the bioenergy sector is giving to the European economy and the growth of our economy. So here you see that in 2017, the biomass and bioenergy sector represented 60.6% billion euro in terms of turnover. And as I said before, this is a large contribution to sustainable growth and green jobs. Indeed, the biomass sector, the bioenergy sector employed over 700,000 people in Europe. In terms of turnover, we said 60.6 billion. Sometimes it's difficult to picture it in our head, but if we want to make a quick comparisons with other renewable energies, bioenergies in total is the 39% of the overall RES turnover. So a very big chunk. And it also represents 0.4% of the European GDP in 2017, with a net export of 5 billion per year. And in terms of employment, also it's important to remind ourselves that in terms of equipment supplying, 74% of these equipment suppliers are based in Europe. And at the moment in Europe, we have over 50,000 bioenergy businesses, and 49% of renewable energy jobs are actually in our sector, in bioenergy. I would also quickly like to touch upon our main source, so forestry. What I would like to underline is that the EU forests are growing hand in hand within the increase of bioenergy. As you see in the slides, on the left-hand side, we're picturing the share of wood removals according to end use, while the slope represents the gross inland energy consumption for forest biomass. As you can notice, although the bioenergy sector has exponentially grown starting from the year 2000, the amount of wood fuel that was harvested and was used from 2000 to 2017 has remained more or less stable. And this is due to the increasing synergies that our sector developed with other forest-based sectors. Now I would like to move to the second part of my presentation and talking a bit about the objectives and the targets that both the European Union and the member states have set for themselves for 2020 and 2030. We're going to see whether they are ambitious enough to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. And in the last part of the presentation, I'm going to underline what we can do about it. So 2020 is actually a very important year for us. It represents the turning point for energy and climate policies. In 2020, 2020 sees the end of the previous climate and energy package. By the end of this year, the European Union needs to achieve 20% of greenhouse gas emission savings, 20% of renewables in the energy mix, and energy consumption, and 20% of energy efficiency improvement. By 2030, we need to do better than that. And within the climate and energy package in 2018, the European Union established that we need to reach 40% of greenhouse gas emission savings, a 32% overall target for renewable energy consumption in the EU, and 32.5% energy efficiency improvement. These objectives are not easy at all to be reached, but in the meanwhile, as we will see afterwards, the European Green Deal was presented. So we will probably see different targets starting from this year already for 2030. So we will need to probably think that the targets that I mentioned here for 2030 will be increased. You see also a question mark. This is really the key years for the transition from 2030, actually from 2020 to 2050. Every policy will be key to reaching the net zero carbon. In this slide here, you see the comparisons between the 2020 targets that the member states of the European Union decided for themselves to be reached in 2020, and the targets they have presented in their final national energy and climate plans this year. You notice probably that there are certain countries that have been more ambitious than others. So on the right-hand side, you will see the top performers. Among the top performers, we have Denmark, which is seeing an increase of 24 percentage points in the next decade, Lithuania, and Sweden. While the ones that are falling short are probably Belgium, Slovakia, Malta, and Slovenia. The reasons are multiple. We also have to assess what are the natural resources, what are the financial resources of these countries, and what are their willingness of applying a certain energy and climate policy. For Estonia here, we see that there is a very interesting increase for the next decade as well. In this slide here, you see another interesting comparison. So as you probably know, the Renewable Energy Directive recast is including a provision that member states should increase the portion of renewable energy in the heating and cooling sector by 1.3 percentage point per year. So we decided to compare this projection for every member state with their actual target for 2030 as presented in their national energy and climate plan. We also decided to picture here in the green bars the percentage of renewables in the heating and cooling sector in 2018. So what we notice here is that member states in many cases have been under-ambitious. Why so? Well, the vast majority of the member states have set a renewable energy target for heating and cooling sector in 2030, which is actually lower than what they should have achieved by applying the 1.3 percentage point increase per year. When we look at the 2030 objectives for bioenergy in the heating and cooling sector, we realize that bioenergy remains the largest renewable energy source for heating and cooling in most member states, but probably its relative share will decrease a bit. In 2030, bioenergy remains the main overall renewable energy source for most member states with near or above 50%. And now we come to the policy bit. So in this part of my presentation, I will talk about the European Green Deal and the challenges and opportunities that this is posing to the bioenergy sector. Some of you are probably familiar with this slide. This was presented by Ursula von der Leyen in December last year to the European Parliament. This gives you an idea, it's a very dense slide, and it gives you an idea of how many different initiatives will scatter from the European Green Deal or have been already published. And the red ticks here are indicating all those initiatives would have a direct impact on our sector. So there are many. Starting on the right-hand side of the screen, you will see those policies and initiatives that are impacting the supply side of our sector. So the Common Agricultural Policy, for example, which is at the moment under discussion in the EU. On the top part of the screen, you see the Biodiversity Strategy for 2030, which was published a couple of months ago, the new Circular Economy Action Plan, and the Clean Air and Water Action Plans. So all strategies that have a lot to do with the environmental dimension. On the left-hand side of the screen, you will see those strategies that will impact the energy side of the policy. So the revision of the 2030 climate and energy targets, the extension of the EU ETS, so the EU emission trading system, the climate law, which is putting into binding legislation the principle of carbon neutrality by 2050, and the review of the energy legislation in general. So the Renewable Energy Directive, the Energy Efficiency Directive, for example, and the Energy Taxation Directive as well. On the bottom part of the screen instead, you will see the policies that have to do with the financing side. So on one side, the just transition, a system of support measures and funds to help the transition so that nobody is left behind. And on the left, the finance to the transition, so the public finance, but also the private finance. So a system of regulation that can basically trigger more and more investments in green energy and climate adaptation, mitigation, and transition in general. So when we speak about carbon neutrality, I think it's important to let you know what we think about it. We think that this is a very ambitious task, and we actually need to get there. So to get there, we need to set a credible path. At the moment, the targets and the objectives that we have set for 2030 are just not enough to get there by 2050 carbon neutral. So we would really support an at least minus 55% greenhouse gas emissions savings by 2030, an increased renewable energy target by 2030 from 32% to probably 50%. We need to tackle those sectors that are more difficult to decarbonize. So we need to tackle first the low renewable energy penetration in the heating sector. And to do this, we probably need to increase the specific renewable energy target in the heating sector from a 1.3 percentage point to 3.1. We need also to remind that bioenergy has been a tremendous help in greenhouse gas emission savings so far. Only in 2017, 7% of greenhouse gas emission savings were due to bioenergy use. And if this helps, you have to think that 7% of greenhouse gas emission savings are corresponding to the yearly emissions of a state like Spain. I'm jumping now to one of the strategies that were recently published by the European Commission. And this is the European Biodiversity Strategy. This was published in May after a bit of delay due to the COVID. And this sets a bit the path for also bioenergy in the next years. On the positive side, sustainable bioenergy is regarded and acknowledged by the EU Biodiversity Strategy as a win-win solution to energy generation. On the negative side, though, the biodiversity strategy is suggesting that a transformative approach needs to be applied for guaranteeing the sustainability of bioenergy. And in particular, the biodiversity strategy is referring to the minimization of use of wild trees. This is not really clarified along the strategy, so it's difficult for our sector to understand what minimization of wild trees is meant. As Bioenergy Europe, we have underlined the fact that wild trees is a bit of an arbitrary definition, and that normally our sector is using a lot of waste and residues from the forestry sector. The annex to this strategy, interesting, is listing some follow-up actions on biomass sustainability. The first one is the assessment of EU and global biomass supply and demand and related sustainability. In fact, the Joint Research Center of the European Commission is now updating their 2018 biomass assessment study. And based on this, this study will inform policy decisions in 2021 regarding the sustainability of biomass. So we can expect an assessment, at least, of those criteria that still need to be implemented. And this is a big challenge because the sector, in order to grow, needs long-term perspective and a bit of policy coherence as well. And also operational guidance of the new sustainability criteria on forest biomass, and we expect this in 2021. We need also to remind the EU Biodiversity Strategy is a non-binding document. This will surely influence the legislative actions in 2021 and subsequent years. Also about the biodiversity strategy, what is interesting to notice is that Bioenergy Europe has welcomed the Renewable Energy Directive sustainability criteria, including biodiversity consideration. Yet again, calling for a review of such criteria before their implementation would be really a premature move that would throw an important economic sector in the uncertainty. Now we get to the 2030 Climate Target Plan. This is a complex name that just indicates the way the various strategies of the European Green Deal will converge into legislative action. And in particular, we are concentrating about the Renewable Energy Directive. The European Commission has recently published a public consultation on the roadmap on the possible review of the Renewable Energy Directive objectives. And what we can understand from this public consultation is that the European Commission would like to integrate the different strategies, so the energy system integration, the renovation wave, which is dealing with decarbonizing the building stock mainly and increasing the energy efficiency of buildings, the biodiversity strategy and the hydrogen strategy in legislative action in the Renewable Energy Directive. So as a sector, we see as a great opportunity to raise the ambition. This will, on one way, translate into the achievement of the carbon neutrality in 2050, and on the other side, represent also an interesting opportunity for our sector to grow further. On the other hand, though, when we look at the public consultation, we understand that the sustainability criteria might be put into question and might be revised before their actual implementation. So this is absolutely a big challenge for the sector itself and for the long-term perspectives. Finally, I would like to also to touch upon a fairly new subject. We have been talking about the importance of private finance for scaling up renewables and green projects and actions regarding climate change mitigation and adaptation. The European Commission has presented some time ago already a proposal on the sustainable finance and a taxonomy regulation. The idea is to give the instruments also to private actors to standardize private green finance instruments. The process is pretty complex. What I would like to say is that we are still waiting for a delegated act, so a specific point in this legislation that is spelling out all the sustainability requirements that the various economic sector need to comply with in order to be considered taxonomy compliant and be part of green private investments. So you can understand that this is really a vital piece of this in the puzzle for the scaling up of bioenergy projects and R&D in the future. we see a big challenge here. So far, the technical expert group report on which this delegated act on the sustainability requirement will be based is not fully aligned with the Renewable Energy Directive sustainability requirements. So we are facing a possible plurality of sustainability criteria for different objectives. And for this reason, we are calling for simplified compliance and coherence with the existing sustainability criteria. And also we think that we need to base the requirements on existing certification able to guarantee compliance, and have requirements on forestry that can be inclusive also of small forest holders. We also think that coherence in this case between the instruments of taxonomy of sustainable finance and renewable energy directive are quite vital to not only to the sector but to the transition as well. We don't want to see sustainable bioenergy and other projects be excluded from the possibility of being financed on the future because of a short-sighted set of sustainability requirements. I would like also to end my presentation underlining one of the activities that we're undertaking in the near future. So Bioenergy Europe is organizing a conference, a European conference, the European Bioenergy Future, from the 18th to the 20th of November. It will be a virtual conference, and we will go in the details of all the policies that are coming up in the European Union landscape. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm available should you have any questions on the presentation.
Thank you very much, Giulia, for your really informative presentation. Very much appreciate you taking time for this presentation and for being here for the questions. So we have actually received several questions, but as we have a limited time, I will only read you two of them, which have received actually the most of the votes as well. One of the problems with renewables like wind and solar is energy storage. What kind of future you see for energy storage?
So thank you for your question. This is a very complex. This is a very complex question indeed. So when we look at the European Union landscape and what is happening at the moment, we see that we are looking at a plethora of different possibilities for energy storage. What we like to say at Bioenergy Europe is that we need to prioritize what is working right now. So bioenergy is a great solution to give flexibility to the grid and to allow even further penetration of wind and sun, for example. At the European level, we hear a lot in this period about green hydrogen, and which can also be a solution in the future. But we know that in terms of efficiency and financing requirements, well, there is a long way to go. So we think that there are several different solutions, but at the moment, what is really working and is renewable is really lays in our sector, bioenergy. So we like to think that we can be a very good complement to variable renewables.
Indeed, many thanks for this answer. Another question: why did you mention? Forest and timber compete with farming in regards of land usage. Do you think there is room to increase forest areas in Europe?
Thanks again for the question. And when we look at the bioenergy strategy, for example, we know that the European Commission is is thinking of increasing by 3 billion trees the amount of forest in Europe in the next 10 years. And this is quite an interesting data. We know also that in Europe forests are growing, and it is true that there is some competition with agriculture in certain countries, but we also need to keep in mind that that bioenergy, that forestry is really a national competence. So the degree to which forestry can grow in Europe depends also to national policy. So I know that this is probably not a satisfactory answer, but it is what it is.
It is what it is, actually. Many thanks again for taking your time, and have a nice day.